Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are
Above Replacement Radio.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. The holidays, the big holiday, so to speak, is come and gone. This is the final ARR episode of 2024, the first fully remote year for us. I don't think we did a single in-person show this year.
No, not a single in-person show. You know, we saw each other in person, but we'd never recorded in person.
No. So it has been quite some time since then. But regardless, we've made it to the end of the sixth year where we've done Above Replacement Radio, if you count 2019, going on to year 7, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, what a long journey it has been. And we are now entering we're already halfway through the 2020s, which is quite crazy.
Yeah, right. I mean, when we were a radio show, like some of those contracts that we talked about that first offseason are just gone now. Like Madison Bumgarner deal is done, Zach Wheeler deal is done, Hyunjin Ryu deal has been done for over a year
Yasmani
now.
Grandal, I believe, was that offseason. That's been done.
Yeah, right. So yeah, like
the JT Realmuto contract is up next year. I remember when that one, I remember when he was a free agent.
Yeah, that was we had already been doing it for a year at that point. So yeah, it is
20 into 21.
Yeah, it is interesting that we have like kind of our own universe and our own sort of recorded takes about a lot of things that are now either really relevant to baseball history or completely irrelevant to baseball history. But yeah, no, it's been a fun ride. But yeah, we have some more big news to get into. The past couple episodes we've talked about some big signings and transactions, and they keep coming along. And some more big pins are dropping. Most notably this past week was the Corbin Burnes signing, where he signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks, which not really a lot of people saw coming. He signed with them for 6 years, $210 million. What did you think about how this deal came about?
Yeah, I mean, like everyone else, the Diamondbacks were certainly not on my radar for the Corbin Burnes sweepstakes. But honestly, I think I like this contract a lot more than I anticipated I would like whatever deal Corbin Burnes got for the team. Obviously, there is a little bit of concern with the strikeout numbers, that they've gone progressively down each year since 2020, 11 to 12% from 2021, specifically from 2024. But regardless, he is obviously still an ace-type pitcher, right? He's put up over 190 innings in each of the last 3 seasons with at most a 3.39 ERA. He's been pretty much a model for consistency for each of the last, you could even argue 5 seasons, really. I mean, 2020 he was also quite good as well. And the Diamondbacks are getting him, for 6 years. There is, I believe, a second-year opt-out in this contract. So, I mean, this is certainly, I think it's very beneficial for both parties here. A lot of the reporting has said that Corbin Burnes got more money offered to him from other teams, but for tax purposes and wanting to stay on the West Coast purposes, he chose Arizona. And this is kind of reminds me a lot of the Zach Greinke deal, right? Same landing spot, same kind of shock value, and very similar numbers as well.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, because that Greinke deal was 6 years as well. And yeah, I believe over $200 million as well.
Just over 200. It's like almost identical numbers between the years and the total dollar value.
Right, exactly. Obviously the markets were a little different. So today Greinke probably would have gotten closer to like 250 or something like that.
Coming off that season?
Yeah. Like he would have
a 1.77 ERA and like 250 or not 250. Yeah, the Greinke contract was 6 years, $206.5 million.
Right.
Borderline the
Right.
same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, it does it's almost fully parallel, except Greinke was probably a little bit better. But yeah, no, it's pleasantly surprising, I would say. And I guess it kind of continues sort of a trend that we saw with the Diamondbacks last offseason, when they surprised us a little bit by, going out getting Eduardo Rodriguez, going out getting Jock Peterson, couple other notable guys as well. And kind of making the necessary moves. And not that this was completely necessary, but it helps them out quite a bit, and it really completes that rotation. You could argue that Zach Gallen's sort of already an ace. But now you have Corbin Burnes there too, and that is absolutely wonderful for them. And it seems like they don't really have much of a hole in that rotation. Looking at it in terms of what it looks like right now as a fully healthy rotation, so to say. Looking at how Fangraphs projects them, it goes Burns, Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, Brandon Fod, and then Jordan Montgomery is a sixth option. So yeah, Brandon Fod, being your number five, I think that's a pretty good spot to be in. The guy had a 3.61 FIP last year, really good strikeout to walk numbers. And now, yeah, there's it's talking about a team that did improve their win total by 5 wins last year and just missed the playoffs. You feel you feel extra confident in this team heading into 2025.
As much talk as there's been about the Dodgers, building this super talented roster with all these expensive players, and all these debates on like whether or not it's good for the game. It's cool to see a team in the same division with probably less financial flexibility, taking it head on, right? I mean, the Diamondbacks could easily kind of just lay over and die and say, like, let's hope we can get him in the DS like we did in 23, or let's just build the best roster to go for the division, make the playoffs, and then see what we can do from there. I do think, there's obviously a lot that needs to go right, but like if enough goes right for Arizona, this team is talented enough to at least compete with the Dodgers in the division for the entire season. I think there's a lot. I mean, first of all, like you mentioned, it solidifies the rotation. The bullpen already has a pretty good back end with Justin Martinez and AJ Puck leading that, along with all the guys you knew from the 2022 postseason or 2023 postseason roster. The lineup had the best weighted runs created plus in baseball last year. There's a lot of really interesting things with this team, and I think Corbin Burnes is a huge, I don't want to say finishing touch, because I don't want to say that this team is done for the offseason, but it adds a major exclamation point to this already very talented and intriguing roster.
Right. And like I think much of the hope last offseason was that, Jordan Montgomery could be that top of the rotation piece that they wanted. And I'll mention, like, that was another good sign that the Diamondbacks were willing to invest in him. Although it didn't work out, it's still a good sign that the Diamondbacks, went out and got him. But unfortunately they didn't get what they wanted out of him. And instead of just being like, oh, that didn't work out, we're not gonna reinvest in our pitching staff because we already invested in him, and we have to pay for him this season. They went out and they just got another pitcher. They got a pitcher of a higher value, and you committed on a long-term basis and a pretty big financial basis. That's 6 years, 210. That is no slouch of a contract. But yeah, I mean, I think it could end up being pretty smart because they're only paying him through his age 35 season, and we know pitchers age a little bit later than position players normally. So this could end up working out very well. I am alarmed at some of the underlying stuff, but in terms of age, there's not much of a reason to believe it will be a steep decline. I could see a decline, but not necessarily a steep one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this signing also takes a lot of pressure off Jordan Montgomery. I mean, there's obviously been a very ugly sort of way that this has played out in almost a year since the contract was signed, right? It was signed around opening day last year, technically made official, I think, on opening day or just after it. Obviously, he did not pitch well. But Ken Kendrick had some choice words, basically trying to bully him into not accepting the player option. And yeah, now they don't really need Jordan Montgomery to be that guy that has to lead this rotation and a guy that you point to when you miss the playoffs and say it's his fault. Because I think the expectations on him are a little less, given, Corbin Burnes is now the guy, and there's obviously naturally less expectations when you're coming off the season that he just had. So I think that makes him a really nice bounce back candidate. And obviously, if that works out, this rotation has so much depth between the 6 options that you mentioned.
Right. And yeah, as much as we're kind of praising the Diamondbacks for making this move and being willing to invest, I do wonder a little bit if this is kind of them choosing Burnes over Zach Gallen, because they will be on the team this upcoming year, but Zach Gallen only has 1 year control left. He's a free agent after this year, so yeah, I guess the chances of the Diamondbacks still investing in Gallen beyond this year, they go down quite a bit. So yeah, in terms of having a two-headed monster for the long-term future, I would say that's pretty unlikely. And if investing in Burnes over Gallen is probably the right choice, at least, taking money out of it, Burnes is probably the better pitcher. But yeah, I do wonder like what this means for Zach Gallen. And, I think it's the idea of an extension this offseason is a little bit less likely.
Yeah, I'm also, just kind of intrigued to see how they, what they do with Corbin Burnes, right? I mean, the Orioles had him throw his cutter 10% less than he did in 2023. Obviously, there's not much really precedent to go off of because Brent Strom left the organization this past offseason, so there will be a new pitching coach. I'm curious to see, do they have him throw that slider or that cutter again the same way that he was in Milwaukee? Do they experiment with other stuff? Do they stick with what the Orioles did? I think there's a lot of question marks to be answered there. Maybe we'll see those questions answered in spring training. Maybe we'll see them answered during the season. I don't know how much say there even will be because now he's a $200 million man. Maybe he gets to throw what he wants to throw. So that's another interesting angle of this. But we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, certainly. And yeah, I guess kind of continuing on with the analytical route of Corbin Burnes. I have been kind of vocal about my concern with his decline in strikeout rate, to pair with his decline in whiff rate. However, kind of looking at the anatomy of his pitch repertoire, not much has changed. So I guess that is a good sign for his future and maybe stabilizing that decline, because yeah, look, like it seems like his movement is fairly similar, if not better than it was when he was dominating on the mound. His velocity is also fairly similar, at least in 2024 it was fairly similar to what it was when he was dominating. So I do wonder what is causing him to not get as many swings and misses. It's probably stuff that I can't find on Baseball Savant. But yeah, I mean, if a Diamondbacks fan is listening and wants to be optimistic about Corbin Burnes for the future, his stuff is still kind of the same quality of what it was when he won that Cy Young. It's just for whatever reason he's not reaping the results of it the way he used to. So I mean, that's something to look out for.
If you go ahead and look at the secondaries, his curveball, which is his second most thrown pitch, still had a 37.8% whiff rate last year, which was a decline. He actually had a near 50% whiff rate in 2023. So that is a steep decline, but still 37% is very good. The slider was at 46.3%. The changeup was at 37.7%. Maybe the Orioles were kind of onto something by having him throw the cutter a little bit less. It's never been, his biggest whiff rate pitch to begin with. Obviously, it was a little bit more so in 2021. an idea, his cutter had a 33.2% whiff rate in 2021, the year that he won the Cy Young. It's gone down each year since then, and it was at 19% last year. But the in terms of the secondaries, it's still very strong. It's still certainly above league average. Like there's a lot that is still there, even if you just were to look at the declining strikeout rate. And while that it can be concerning, I think there is certainly still a lot of optimism that if, especially for 6 years, you're still going to get an ace type pitcher regardless.
Right, right. Yeah, each of the last 4 years, that cutter, despite not being a big whiff rate pitch, that cutter has had a run value of at least 18 each of the last 4 years. So I think that's just kind of what gets him ahead in the count, gets him, he gets it over the plate, gets some strikes, competitive strikes, not just leaving it over the middle of the plate. And I think that I would imagine that the league average whiff rate on cutters is a little bit below average. I'm looking up the number now. Cutters from the league and
I got it. It was 23.4%
this past year.
Yes.
Okay, that's about average. League
Yeah,
average
Corbin
whiff rate
Burnes
is
was a little bit off that last year, but he was far above it in the past.
Interesting. So yeah, but the velocity and movement is there, so it's interesting to see the results not be the same. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, there's certainly, in terms of outlooking the Diamondbacks and their potential for 2025, it goes up quite a bit, especially like now if they do make the playoffs. You're thinking about a rotation with Burnes and Gallen at the top, and if they have to, if they're in all likelihood they would get a wild card spot, they're playing in a best of 3 series. That is a really good spot to be in. If they have those guys healthy at that point in the year, Burnes and Gallen at the top, like that'd be a really good situation to be in. So yeah, and last thing with Burnes, workload is tremendous. At least 190 innings each of the last 3 years. And it's not something you can necessarily rely on. I mean, like, last year the Red Sox signed Lucas Giolito for workload, and he still hasn't pitched an inning for them. So things come up, obviously, but in terms of just innings per start, Burnes has that, and hasn't really had any long IL stints the past few years. So that is also a bonus, and probably why, probably upped his free agent value a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I think that's everything I have. Did you have anything to add on the Corbin Burnes signing?
I do think it's quite fascinating the way that Arizona has approached building this rotation over the last couple of off seasons, because I do think that they had some excuse to maybe lay low on it over the last couple of years as a team that's never, it's not exactly known for always being big spenders, right? I mean, obviously you have Gallen and Kelly at the top of that rotation. Gallen, you could argue as an ace, Kelly, you could argue as a 2, but they also have a lot of young guys that, have come up the last couple of years that at least have looked interesting. You could talk about Brandon Pfaadt. You could talk about Ryan Nelson. Dre Jameson was a name, if you remember him, although he did have Tommy John surgery at the end of 2023. So he obviously hasn't been a part of the, the short-term plan for either the last 2 off seasons. But, I think this team had plenty of excuses to say, no, we got this big rotation coming up. We have all these guys. We're going to stick with that and see if we get something. Instead, they've gone out and spent on Corbin Burnes, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Jordan Montgomery all in free agency. And I do kind of respect that. A lot of teams are obviously a little cautious about spending on pitchers. The Diamondbacks have not really operated that way in a time where they maybe had an excuse to do so.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, potentially they're kind of taking advantage of the fact that a lot of their lineup, they don't really have to pay a whole lot yet. Like Corbin Carroll, for example.
They already did.
He signed an extension, but he's in the cheaper years of that deal. Ketel Marte is not, being paid that much right now. He's getting maybe like $15 million a year or something like that. Like Lourdes Gurriel is.
How much time does he have left? He got like really underpaid on that deal, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and like Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is kind of on a cheaper deal. So is Eugenio Suarez. So yeah, might as well just kind of go deep on the pitchers. So yeah, and yeah, right now they, according to Spot Track, they have the 11th highest payroll. They're right behind Boston. Look at them go. Um, just ahead of Toronto, and San
Imagine
Francisco.
telling someone like in 2016, within the next decade, the Diamondbacks will be right behind the Red Sox in payroll,
Yeah, yeah, and ahead of the
like
Giants.
pre Greinke signing.
Right. And ahead of the Giants too.
And ahead of the Giants.
That's almost more offensive.
Yeah,
Because they're division foes, and the Giants, especially yeah, back in 2016, they were signing everybody. They had
they got
Cueto.
Johnny Cueto.
Yeah, they had like
Didn't they
Matt
spend
Cain
big
on a
on
big
Will Smith,
deal.
or they traded for Will Smith?
Um, but yeah, anything more before we get into the next signing?
No, we are gonna stick in the division with this one, right?
Um, stick in the or
Teoscar.
oh yes, Teoscar Hernandez
Mm-hmm.
before the other one. Teoscar Hernandez staying with the Los Angeles Dodgers on a 3-year, $66 million deal, which makes it out. I think he signed for 1 in 23, so that makes it out to a total of 4 years, $89 million.
Something
So
like that.
yeah, so him kind of taking the cheaper deal, I think, or the shorter term deal last year kind of worked out for him, because he gets 3 years, $66 million this time around. What did you think about this re-signing?
I honestly didn't think they would be in it after signing Michael Conforto. I kind of thought that they were going to, take Conforto as the cheap option and then run out a Andy Pajes or a James Outman next year and hope that they can get something there. But no, they're kind of doubling down here with that. I mean, it made sense to bring him back. Obviously, he was a major contributor on the World Series team last year. The most I'd say memorable contribution was the game tying double. Right? It was game tying double in the clinching game against the Yankees in the fifth inning.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the big one. Obviously, um, yeah, I mean they're kind of just further solidifying the core that they had last year. I don't know, not much else to say about that.
right. Yeah, no, it's one of those deals where you take a lot of the time we'll see a World Series champion kind of sign a guy who was significant to their season the previous year. It already happened this past season, or this past off season, with Tommy Edman. But yeah,
Well,
it's
they didn't I mean, they extended him, right?
oh yeah, that's true. They still had control left on him.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, but yeah, with Teoscar Hernandez, yeah, it's definitely interesting. This will take him through his age 34 season, so not too deep. And yeah, I'm just kind of I'm figuring out. I guess just their outfield depth was not it wasn't as deep as I initially maybe thought it was. And maybe
Mhm.
just kind of the decline of James Outman last year probably made that a bit more of a thing. So it does they needed outfielders, so I guess um they did want to go that route, because it doesn't look like they really have um too many options there right now. So it probably makes a good amount of sense for them.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Obviously, it's I mean, another guy like Corbin Burnes kind of been pretty consistent over the last few years. I know that the Mariners year was obviously not as strong. It's only a 740 OPS. Although the OPS, it did go up exactly 100 points last year. Sprint speed is still there. I mean, he's kind of a guy where you know what you're getting, right? He's going to be a power hitter. He's going to drive the ball, hit it very hard, and find his way into a lot of home runs. And it was the number was 33 last year. He's hit at least 25 in each of the last 3 seasons. Yeah, kind of a guy where you know what you're getting, but also obviously you don't have to like wonder what that looks like. I think obviously the Dodgers are a team that knows perhaps more about Teoscar Hernandez than any other team. I know he's not the only team that he's played for. Um, but they obviously know what he looks like in Dodger Stadium. They know how he fits on the roster. They know, how he plays in a bigger market like LA, obviously the biggest market that he's played in. So, I think there is definitely a lot of value in, already knowing what the guy can bring. And, I think it was pretty clear that he wanted to stay. And yeah, they got him on that 3-year deal now.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess the last thing I really have to say about this is like the Dodgers roster is already looking really good, but if you had to nitpick, I guess the outfield was probably their weakest area at the moment, considering the rotation looks amazing right now as it always does in late December/January. For some reason, it always changes by the time October comes around, but right now it looks wonderful. Bullpen, they're always gonna be able to figure out. The infield and their catching position looks pretty good, but yeah, the outfield, unless Betts is in there, it looked a little bit it looked a little bit incomplete. This helps them out a little bit. Maybe I would like the deal a little bit more if DH was an option for him, because he certainly would be able to fill that role, but obviously they have Ohtani there, so that's not necessarily going to be a thing. But yeah, it's a deal like that would make sense for a team like the Dodgers who can't afford it. But so yeah, I have no qualms with this whatsoever.
A couple of little interesting facts about Teoscar Hernandez. Obviously, like I mentioned, the OPS went up 100 points between 2023 and 24, and was changing home ballparks from Seattle to LA a part of that? I'm sure it absolutely was, but beneath the surface, you might look at some things and wonder what exactly else could have contributed to that. His ground ball rate went up by 4%. His line drive rate went down by 2.5%. He didn't hit fastballs particularly well. Yeah, in fact, he had quite a steep decline. He went from hitting 307 and slugging 661 on four seamers to hitting 250 and slugging 451. That's a 210-point drop in slugging percentage on four seamers. And there's two quite simple answers, and it's some of the stuff that I love preaching on this show, especially for power hitters, is the quality of fly balls. It's not just that you're hitting fly balls, it's that you're hitting good fly balls, and that's exactly what Teoscar Hernandez did last year. In 2023, only 15% of his fly balls were pulled. In 2024, he upped that to 24.3%. So 9.3% increase in percent of fly balls that were pulled. In terms of fly balls that were barreled, they went from 31% in 2023 to 42.1% in 2024. That's a 11.1% increase on that.
Yep. Yeah, pulled fly balls, they do make quite the difference. And yeah, certainly when you're pulling them at Dodger Stadium instead of T-Mobile Park, that
Yeah,
also
you're going to see some nice results.
plays a little bit of a factor. And yeah, I guess with Teoscar Hernandez,
I got another one real quick. That 42.1% barrel rate on fly balls. In 2024, there were 101 hitters that hit at least 100 fly balls. Teoscar Hernandez's barrel rate on fly balls ranked fourth among those 101. The only three that ranked above him in order were Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, and Shohei Ohtani.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are guys who have, obviously tremendously high average exit velocities.
Which kind of just goes to show you what kind of power hitter Teoscar Hernandez is.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he doesn't do it on exactly the best basis compared to the other three, but the power is right up there with the three of them.
Right. And I mean, those, like, in general, he has a 15% barrel rate, or he had a 15% barrel rate this past year, and it's never been in the single digits, not even really particularly close to the single digits.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you're wondering what kind of that means,
2016, of course.
Yeah, if you're wondering what that kind of means, barrel rate on fly balls, it's basically like getting bang for your buck on your fly balls. Like, how many of those fly balls really have a chance to go out of the stadium. With Teoscar Hernandez, it's a lot. And that's not the case with everyone. You mentioned that's fourth highest out of 101. And yeah, last thing, I know last time I said last thing, but he's going to be making $22 million a year. Three of the
There will be
past
deferments.
Yeah, with some deferments. Of course, the Dodgers are the only team that does that.
Famously, yeah. No one else has ever figured out you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, the Dodgers invented it, and
No.
they
In fact,
also
no one's been talking about deferment day for at least the last 15 years or so because of one singular player.
yeah, no, that's not a thing in history, and
People are like, wait, deferments are supposed to be for bad players. The Dodgers can't do it for good players. You're only supposed to
yeah,
defer to Bobby Bonilla.
yeah, we're not gonna have a Shohei Ohtani day, at least not to celebrate his deferments.
That's gonna go crazy. Shohei Ohtani gets paid 68 million. If you thought Bobby Bonilla getting like a 1.3 million every year was a big celebration, wait till Shohei Day when he gets 68 million dollars a year for 10 years.
that will be something for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Shohei Ohtani, by the way, going to be a father.
congratulations to him. He he's he's going to have a child, and he'll probably be well, whoever they may be. Even if I think if even if he has a girl, she'll probably make it to the
Oh,
MLB.
yeah. Yeah, the first female MLB player will be Shohei Ohtani's daughter.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I remember seeing a tweet when it was revealed that his wife was a professional basketball player in Japan, being like, is it possible to invest in the future of an unconceived or the athletic future of an unconceived child? And it's like, well, now we get to see the full progress, which
yeah,
I can't imagine there will be much public posting of. I think Shohei is probably going to keep that on the down low.
unless like we just get 5 years from now we just start getting training videos,
Yeah,
like
it's like
we get a full montage.
it's like Baby Gronk if it was like an enjoyable content.
Yeah. It's like, wow, my son, Shohei Ohtani Jr., he's 7 years old. He just
He just hit
benched.
a 380-foot home run
Yeah,
off a tee.
he just deadlifted 400 pounds. He's seven.
He's
Can
already
barely,
committed. He's already received offers from 7 schools.
yeah. But yeah, Teoscar getting 22 million a year. Fangraphs has valued three of his last four seasons over that dollar value. So yeah, I think that how it calculates is the pool of wins above replacement that post arbitration players get and the pool of money that they get, and they take the average of both. And Teoscar Hernandez has gotten over the um has gotten a good amount of value for of three of the past 4 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything more before we get into the next 3-year deal?
No, who do you want to go on with here?
Yeah, Sean
The one that
Manaea.
happened right after our last recording?
Yes, Sean Manaea, left-handed pitcher, last year of the New York Mets, and he will be staying in Queens, for a 3-year, $75 million deal. What did you think about this move?
This is awesome for the Mets. For one, I'm very stunned that he got the same contract that Nathan Eovaldi got, right?
True. Yeah.
Right? Like Sean Manaea is younger. I think he's better. Uh, he obviously had a very strong stretch there with the Mets, in late in the season and into the playoffs as well. This team, like I know that Sean Manaea is, it's sort of a mid-tier free agent, right? That's kind of how he was viewed, and that's kind of how he was treated with his earnings. But I mean, this team, looks so much better with him at the top of the rotation. There's less I'd say unpredictability. Obviously health is never a guarantee for any pitcher, but I mean, you can look at him, say opening day starter, and not feel weird about it, which I don't think you could say the same with really anyone else in this rotation, given the expectations that will be placed on this team this coming season.
Right. Yeah, they certainly needed to add more to the rotation. And yeah, Manaea is a good option there. And yeah, it possibly becomes, their number one automatically, kind of depending on how the organization views Kodai Senga right now. But yeah, it was pretty good, interesting signing. I guess maybe the reason why he got the same value as Eovaldi is, although Manaea had a very good 2024 in which he got Cy Young votes, that was his first time having a sub 4 ERA since 2021, and first time like really in a full season having a sub 3.5 ERA. So I think just teams weren't necessarily fully bought in on this version of Sean Manaea, where a couple starts going a couple different directions could have changed his value a good bit. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, I think the Mets reaped the benefits of his production last year. Got 180 innings out of him. First time he'd had that level of production in a pretty long time. So yeah, you just kind of hope you get more of the same with him.
I mean, I was kind of he was one of my players to watch, a couple years ago. I want to say it was the year he was with the Giants was when I put him down as a player to watch. It took a little bit of time to actually fully see that breakout come to fruition, but yeah, it did finally happen. I would say to the degree that I was hoping last year. Over his last 12 starts, Sean Manaea had a 3.09 ERA and a 3.35 FIP. 83 strikeouts and only 18 walks and 75 and two-thirds innings pitched. So the strikeout to walk numbers were excellent. Yeah, I mean, this is just a very strong. I mean, he's going to be treated like top of the rotation. And you know, is he like that capital A ace that we're talking about with someone like Corbin Burnes? No, I wouldn't say that, but I think the pitching staff, like I mentioned, it looks so much more respectable with him at the top than how it looked before. Like this team has too much expectations to be starting, no offense, someone like Kodai Senga, someone like Frankie Montas on opening day.
Right, right. I mean, I kind of see this deal as more important come late in the season, postseason time, as opposed to, I guess, getting them over the edge in the regular season. Because yeah, with now the Mets, having made the playoffs last year and signing Juan Soto, the expectation is that they do get into the playoffs this year. And I don't think Manaea is necessarily the guy that is going to have so much of an impact that he gets you a division when you weren't going to win the division before, or gets you into the playoffs when you weren't going to be in the playoffs before, or not necessarily in playoff contention before. However, he we saw last year he can be really impactful in the postseason. You don't feel weird having him out there in the sixth inning, as we saw last year. He was able to get quality innings really no matter, and be comfortable out there, no matter how late in the game it was. So yeah, I think he's just going to be more important there than getting the Mets through the season necessarily. He'll help for sure, but he's not necessarily the guy where it's like, oh, he's going to drive this team into the playoffs, but he will help them out in the important games, if they do make it to that point.
And not only that, but I mean, I talked about the late season breakout. There's obviously reasons for that. Obviously, if you watched any of the broadcasts when he was pitching, you saw that they mentioned the change in arm angle. As repetitive as it was to see that, it does mean something. Last season, from March through July, his arm angle was about 25 to 27 ish per degrees when he was throwing the ball. In August, it went down to 18 degrees. September, it went down to 15 degrees. He was going for a lower arm slot, getting a lot more results out of that. And, it showed, obviously, like I mentioned, a 3.09 ERA in those last 12 starts. That goes back to July 30th, by the way. And I think, like Teoscar Hernandez, this is a situation where the Mets know this version of Sean Manaea better than anyone else. I think they clearly would know his value more than anyone else because they've seen this, this revitalized version of him that was much better in 2024. And I think it makes the most sense that he is staying there for his purposes to continue building himself up. It makes most sense for the Mets because they needed a frontline starter. I think they believe he can become even more than what he already is or what he already has been. So yeah, I mean, this reunion made too much sense. I'm damn surprised that it didn't come at a higher cost, but it's very good for both sides.
Yeah, I think it's a fair cost. And I don't know. I was kind of surprised. Given the quality of, or given his history, I was kind of surprised it was that high, but I wasn't necessarily putting it into context. Because yeah, I think deals are just, getting bigger and bigger now. So him making 25 million, 5 years ago, making 25 million a year was kind of a big deal. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. It's not given out solely to guys who are seen as like aces in the league. It's given out to guys who are,
Give it up to guys that you think can be healthy and put
yeah,
up like productive seasons.
right. Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious what if the arm angle is that effective because the ERA did go down, but the FIP
Mm,
didn't really go down much. So a lot of and his BABIP was 212 in his final his BABIP against was 212 in those final 18 games. I haven't looked at like the
we are looking at different spans.
302 ERA in the last.
I'm looking at 12 from July 30th to the end of the season, where it went. His FIP
Excuse
was
me.
335, and he had the ninth highest F4 among all starters.
Okay, no, yeah, we are looking at different spans.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was noticing a different ERA trend. Yeah, that's interesting. BABIP against was
208.
208. But yeah, it looks like yeah, strikeout and walk numbers were probably I think that looks like it improved in the final 12 starts. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I think it'll work. He makes the Mets better than they would have been without him, certainly. But yeah. Um, do we want to talk about the next pitcher who came off the market?
Yeah.
Yeah, Walker Buehler on a I guess prove it a little bit of a prove it deal, maybe a little bit of a I can fix him deal. Um, Gets 1 year, $21 million with the Boston Red Sox. What did you think about this move?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it by saying it's a 1 year prove it slash I can fix him type of signing. Uh, I was kind of surprised that a team didn't look at what happened in the postseason last year and give him a deal based off that because I mean he pretty clearly I think made a lot of people, at least fans, forget how he was in the regular season. People kind of had to have that reality check once they remembered, oh yeah, this guy had a 5.38 ERA and looked like a shell of his former self. And granted, he's obviously been through a lot in the last few years. He had to deal with Tommy John surgery. He had some other stuff going on. Um, but for the Red Sox, I think they needed just another pitcher. I don't know exactly where he fits into this rotation. I don't know if they expect him to be the two behind Crochet. I don't know if they have him maybe filling a back end spot. I'm sure they're probably going to keep him in the rotation when guys like Patrick Sandoval and Lucas Giolito come back. Obviously, that depends on what he does, but I would imagine the expectation for this year is that he's in the rotation and they hope that he can throw 25, 30 starts.
Right. And yeah, he hasn't gotten the consistent innings. He hasn't had consistent innings since 2021 just due to the fact that he's been injured and whatnot, had the Tommy John surgery, which was unfortunate. So yeah, like I guess the advantage to signing him now is like it'll be his first year back with kind of a normal regimen, I think. And getting a full spring training and And getting all that in, new organization, kind of a fresh start, and trying to get him going in the right direction. And yeah, I mean, the obvious benefit is that it's very low risk. It's not a long-term commitment. It's the in fact, it's the least amount of commitment you can put in a contract. 1 year deal. The $21 million, I'm not freaking out about, because it's only an investment for this year. And yeah, I'm sure, as a Red Sox fan, it would have been cooler to get someone who's maybe a little bit of a safer investment, or that, or someone that has had more recent success. But it's better. It's certainly better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue with this from the Red Sox perspective is if you're someone who wanted them to go out and go bigger on a pitcher, whether that be Corbin Burnes, whether that have been Max Fried, something like that. Not that the Buehler the Buehler signing affected Fried at all, because that happened before, but I'm sure it was frustrating for some to see them go with the cheaper option again. That's what they've kind of made a habit of doing over the last half decade. This one, I think, does make a little more sense than most of the ones. I mean, I think you already have the ace type pitcher off the board, at least with the upside of Garrett Crochet. Tanner Houck, I think, slides in nicely as a 2 if he can replicate what he did last year. You can hope for breakouts from guys like Brian Bayo, hope for bounce backs from guys like Walker Buehler, and I think that's kind of where he fits in. Is we're trying to build him back up to be more than what we paid for.
Right. And yeah, I guess that, some of the more optimistic things you could talk about with Buehler, kind of similar to Burnes, is that, that strikeout rate has declined the past couple years that he's been active, and steeply declined, particularly in 2022 and 2024. But and whiff rate went down as well. But the velocity and the pitch movement is fairly similar to what it was when he was doing really well. So there is that base of stuff that's there. It's just about getting the results off of it. So maybe that's something that someone like Craig Breslow was looking at, is it's like, okay, he still averages 95 on his fastball. He still gets over 5 inches above average on his curveball vertical drop. So like the base of stuff is there. It's just about working it out more, and getting more innings, and just figuring it out along the way. So I guess that is something to be optimistic about, is that he has the same stuff as he did when he was, I think, a top 5 Cy Young finisher. It's just about kind of putting it into the correct place to get the best results off of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of everything that I have.
Yeah, no, me as well. So yeah, last signing before we get into our next top 10 positional top 10 rankings is the Gleyber Torres signing. He went to the Detroit Tigers. I know he went to the Tigers. I totally forget what.
1 year, 15 million.
1 year, 15 million. So yeah, that is not much of a commitment.
No.
1 year, $15 million to the Detroit Tigers. What did you think about the deal?
I think for the Tigers, the most redeeming part of this deal is that it is 1 year and 15 million. I think I would like this a lot less if he had signed for multiple years. I'm not going to fault the Tigers for this signing, because unfortunately, the way that things are, any hitter that they signed, you're going to point to the home run totals, projected at Comerica Park, and say like, oh, they just signed a guy who's going to be worse. It's not exactly a fair analysis, because that just simply is going to happen with every hitter. But Gleyber Torres does happen to be a little more affected perhaps than most, right? I mean, he's moving away from Yankee Stadium, where he was, a big opposite field home run hitter with the short porch out there. And I think, they're not asking him to be a home run guy. I think they're asking him to, grab some extra base hits, shoot the gaps, get some doubles, things like that, and kind of just be exactly what a lot of this offense is, right? I mean, the Tigers weren't exactly a home run hitting team last year. what? How many? Like Riley Green led the team with 24. Only a handful of guys had double digits, but yeah. I mean, I think it's not a bad signing, especially given it's relatively low risk. I don't love that it probably moves Colt Keith off of second this year. I don't really think that's quite the answer, but I mean, Gleyber Torres did quite literally turn down an offer from the Nationals because they wanted him to play third. So I think pretty clearly they're going to have him play second here.
Right, right, right. And yeah, I guess this sort of, I mean, at least on the Fangraphs projected roster, it moves Spencer Torkelson kind of out of the picture for right now.
Which I
At
don't
least,
love. I don't love that they are giving up on him like that. I really do think there's still something there to be found.
right, because he at least he's always been able to kind of hit the ball hard. It's if I remember correctly.
He had a 30 home run season in 2023.
Right, yeah, I do remember that. And yeah, like the potential is still there. I mean, yeah, he's in 2023 hit over 30 homers, 91.8 mile per hour average exit velocity, 14% barrel rate. Just needed to, I guess hit the ball more consistently. But yeah, no, that's in theory, and that's just a Fangraphs projection. I imagine he'll get some playing time, but um I don't think they're going to quite give up on him, but this does certainly lean toward more, giving him less chances. So yeah, that is interesting, and based on the numbers last year, Colt Keith was not a defensive liability at second base. So maybe that
And
improves
Gleyber
their
Torres was.
right, right, right. So yeah, it's interesting, and the way you just described what they might want out of him, in terms of like shooting gaps, getting doubles, stuff like that. It would make a little bit more sense to invest
It's
in
the
someone
only
like
thing that does make sense. If they were asking him to be the same home run hitter that he was in New York, you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah. Well, what I'm gonna say is, the is that description would align a lot more with someone like Ha-Sung Kim. I don't know what
Yes.
what the market is on him right now. Maybe he'll get a bigger deal than Gleyber Torres, but um, Ha-Sung Kim has had good history with, getting doubles and when he does get on base, stealing bases and whatnot. I know last year was sort of a down year for him, but he's been, sort of that type of player. Has been able to get on base pretty consistently. But yeah, like Ha-Sung Kim in 2022 had 29 doubles, and then the year after had 23 doubles. So yeah, yeah, I think yeah, it could be a little bit of a misstep for the Tigers, but yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see what the results are.
Yeah. I
But
mean, like I said, I think the most redeeming part of this deal for the Tigers is that it's 1 year and 15 million.
right, yeah, it's not.
As for Glaber, the Yankees, it didn't sound like we're going to bring him back. I believe the reporting was that the Yankees did not give an offer. So at the very least, this gives you a 1 year prove it deal to show, I can. I mean, he did have reverse splits last year. He did have a better OPS on the road, but you could show like, hey, I don't have to, be at Yankee Stadium to be a successful hitter. In fact, here's me at one of the best pitcher friendly ballparks, and I'm still doing XYZ. So it gives him an opportunity to really up the market on himself. He's only going to be 28 this year, so certainly room for a multi-year deal after this year if it goes well enough.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, he's only heading into his age 28 season. But yeah,
I could kind of see this as a hitter version of what the Tigers did with Jack Flaherty last year.
true. Yeah.
Is sign a guy to a 1 year deal. Hopefully he works out, and if so, you either keep him there, or maybe you trade him and open the door up for guys like Torkelson, for guys like Colt Keith to go back to second, because I think yes, Gleyber Torres probably improves the offense, but I don't think it's the most necessary thing. I
Yeah,
mean, ideally they should still be on Alex Bregman, which it sounds like they still are,
right, right.
because they needed to add offense this offseason, and Gleyber Torres certainly does add that, but that's not the piece. It can't be the piece, at least.
True. Yeah. But yeah, anything more on the Torres deal?
No.
All right. Well, yeah, that shall do it for the current events of Major League Baseball. Yeah, a couple pins dropping. And yeah, who do we have left on the market? We had Jack Flaherty on the market.
Jack Flaherty, Alex Bregman, Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always interested to see the Pete Alonso sweepstakes. Like how much, what are these teams going to value him as? Because
Yeah.
people might be surprised, like, oh, they only
I
got
feel like there really
this.
hasn't been a lot on him. I mean, he's a Boris guy, so I don't. There's definitely some capacity of reporting that's normally done, but I feel like there just hasn't been a lot.
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. I'm very curious to see how his contract will compare to Christian Walker's. Alonso is younger, so I imagine it'll be longer, but I wonder what the average annual value is going to be. Um, but yeah,
Do you think he tops 158 million, which is what he was offered by the Mets earlier this year?
it's a good question. No, because
Yeah.
I think the most he'll get is a 6-year deal, and I don't see him making more than 20. It would be 26 million a year is what he would have to top, and I don't think he's going to get that much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean Christian
considering
Walker I think could have gotten more, and that's probably not good for Pete Alonso.
true, yeah, that's true. But yeah, do we want to get into our next rankings?
Yeah, let's do it.
Next positional rankings. Yeah, the we are doing center field this week. If you're interested in our top 10 first baseman list, check out Above Replacement Radio episode 338. We have that up. Rank them. That was our first of the 2025 run. And yeah, we were doing center field this week. And yeah, disclaimer beforehand, Jarren Duran is not going to be involved because he's a projected left fielder, at least on Fangraphs. And I think just based on how the Red Sox infield lines up, Ceddanne Rafael is going to move to center. And Duran's going to get one of the corner spots alongside Abreu. So yeah, he's not going to be involved. Aaron Judge was each of our number one center fielders last year. He's probably going to go to a corner outfield spot. Probably right field as he has been most of his career. So Aaron Judge is not going to be involved in this list either. And yeah, I think those are all the guys that got some significant center field time last year that won't be involved in this list. And then yeah, these are lists going into 2025, what we believe they will do in 2025, and what we kind of expect out of them. It's not necessarily based on what they have done, but more about what we think they will do. But yeah, without further ado, who is your number 10 center fielder for 2025?
Yeah, like we talked off there beforehand, but last week with the first base list, it was very similar to what we put together last year in terms of just the names on the list with some shakeup in the order. There was a lot of shakeup here in center field. Obviously, like I mentioned, like Chris mentioned, Judge is no longer on these lists because he is in right field. He would be our number one center fielders if he was on this list, but he is not. And I have 5 returners to my list. Chris has 4. Number 10 is one of those newcomers and someone that I am quite surprised to be putting on this list. I'm talking about J.J. Bleday from the Athletics, the Sacramento Athletics, as of right now. But he had a very strong season last year, slashing 243, 324, 437 with a 761 OPS. Obviously, above league average hitter. The defense was, he did struggle a little bit out there in center, but regardless, he put together a very strong season. I really like that I really like his offensive profile. He was a high sweet spot rate guy. He had a high walk rate and a low strikeout rate, which is, I think, kind of rare to see both. In fact, JJ Bleday was one of just 10 qualifying hitters last year with a K rate below 20%, a walk rate above 10%, and a sweet spot rate above 35%. The other 9 to do that were Freddie Freeman, Justin Turner, Jonathan India, Mookie Betts, Isaac Paredes, Nolan Schanuel, Yordan Alvarez, Juan Soto, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So those are obviously some very strong names on the list, and Bleday is right there with them. So for that, I decided he was going to make my top 10 this year. I don't even know if I had him making my top 10 going into the production of this list, but I thought I'd at least put him down for consideration. And I was pretty happy with what I saw. He had a 34.8% ground ball rate last year and a 31.3% fly ball rate. I think that could play very nicely in Suter Health Park next year, at least compared to the Oakland Coliseum. I'm very optimistic to see what the offensive impact is on that field. I anticipate that it will be maybe a little more offense heavy than the Oakland Coliseum was. And for that reason, I am putting JJ Bleday on my list. He is my number 10 center fielder.
Yeah. He certainly showed some promise last year. I think got like 3 wins above replacement or something like that.
He did.
So yeah, JJ Bleday, number 10 for Daniel's list. My number 10 is one of my newcomers. And also I'm noticing that a lot of my players are in their early or mid 20s. And I guess that's kind of natural that as outfielders get older, maybe they do move into the corner spots, but this is a younger guy, not a lot of experience in the league, but showed some promise at the tail end of last year. And we were talking about the Tigers this in our most recent segment. I'm talking about Parker Meadows of the Detroit Tigers. Parker Meadows, he was not on my list last year, as I mentioned, but yeah, he's heading into his age 25 season. And in the final 2 months of last year, he was really, really good on both sides of the base, on both sides of the baseball. In his final 47 games of the year, which was right after he came off the IL, he had the 13th highest FWAR among all position players. So he was a top 15 player in baseball for the final 2 months of the year. That was when he had an 840 OPS, and he was, putting up very good defense and base running numbers. Overall, throughout the year, he had +7 total outs above average, and that was only in 82 games. So in a full season, he would have had double digit outs above average. And then also on the bases, he had a 62% extra base taken rate, and I feel like that can be somewhat consistent because he had a 93rd percentile sprint speed. So he's very athletic, very defensively valuable. And in the final 2 months of last year, showed that he can be very offensively valuable as well. And I'm sure with that sprint speed and being a left-handed hitter, he can outperform some of those expected numbers because he can get some infield hits, leg out some singles that a lot of other players in the league could not leg out. So I expect him to outperform some expected numbers, put up really, really good defense, and just have a general productive year in what would be his first full year in the big leagues. So Parker Meadows getting my number 10 spot. Who is your number 9?
My number 9 is another first timer on this list, a guy that I am very excited to be putting on this list. I think it's very cool that he had a breakout last year. I think we all knew what the strengths were going into 2024. I also think we definitely knew what the weaknesses were, and he improved on a lot of that while keeping it the strengths. I'm talking about Brenton Doyle from the Colorado Rockies, who put together, like I said, a relatively similar season on surface to JJ Bleday, 260, 317, 446 for 763 OPS. OPS plus, I would imagine, is a little bit down based on cores, but he had quite the impressive second half. I mean, he had a July last year that I suspect a lot of baseball nerds like you and I will be talking about for quite a while, like a May of 2013 Dom Brown type of month, where he slashed 333, 394, 800 for an 1194 OPS and 99 plate appearances throughout the month of July. I mean, what? Brenton Doyle. No, I mean, he is one of the best defensive players in the game. We knew that last year. He continued that this year with 98th percentile outs above average in center field. He obviously has a lot of a lot of outfield to play out there in Coors. It's one of the larger outfields in all of baseball, and he did it. He for 2 straight years now has done it basically better than anyone else really could. So that's awesome. The base running is also very strong. He has 94th percentile sprint speed, and the offense, it came with it, right? He's the kind of guy where you don't need him to be this superstar. We don't need him to be the 1194 OPS hitter that he was in July. We just need him to be 763. That's perfect, and that's exactly what he did last year. One thing that really stuck out to me when I'm doing these lists, one thing that I really like looking at, maybe as like a tiebreaker, is how they did on four-seam fastballs, because that's the pitch you're going to see the most of unless you really struggle against off speed. And Brenton Doyle, he had a negative 12 run value on four-seam fastballs from April through June last year, and a 0 run value from July through September. His whiff rate on four-seamers went from 32.5% in April through June to 21.6% in July through September. So he got so much better on four-seamers. And I know 0, run value is nothing to like freak out about, but when the precedent was negative 12, that is quite excellent. So I really liked the improvements that he showed on four-seamers, and obviously everything else kind of went with it. So Brenton Doyle is cracking my list this year at my number 9 spot.
Right. My number 9 is someone who was on my list last year. He's going down quite a bit. It is Luis Robert, who was my number 4 center fielder last year. He is heading into his age 27 season, but last year just kind of on all fronts was a disaster. He got hurt early in the year, but came back. He still managed to get, I think, over 100 games on the field, maybe even around 120. But so it's not a small sample size of what happened. His OPS plus went from 130 in 2023 to 87. His expected WOBA went from the 76th percentile in 2023 to the 6th percentile in 2024. And then he went from a plus 12 defensive run value to a neutral, 0 defensive run value. So yeah, he had a really, really bad year last year. So I'm still kind of figuring out what to think of him. I'm not completely writing off last year, but I'm not saying that that is who he is, because if I thought that was who he is, he would not make this list. So yeah, he's 2 years removed from a very good season, and he's also, as I mentioned, he's only heading into his age 27 season, so it's not like, oh, the decline is arriving for Luis Robert. This very easily could have been an outlier this past year, and I could easily see him return to MVP vote getting form. But given the fact that he's coming off a year with a neutral defense and an 87 OPS plus, I can't consider him with the top echelon right now. So Luis Robert getting my number 9 spot. Who's your number 8?
For my number 8, I am staying in Chicago, but going north for a guy that I'm very high on this year for various reasons. I'm talking about Pete Crow Armstrong from the Chicago Cubs. This is a guy that I would love to see in my top 5 on this list next year, maybe even top 3. I don't know how likely it is. That's why I have him at number 8, because there's obviously definitely a lot of flaws that we saw last year, but also so much potential. Chris, I don't know if you know this. He went to Harvard Westlake High School. Have you heard of this place, Chris?
Yeah, no, I have an idea of it for sure.
Yeah, they're great with position players. That's what that's why Pete Crow Armstrong came out of there. So, he's going into his age 22 season next year, or excuse me, his age 23 season next year. I assume the Cubs are probably anticipating he's going to be their everyday center fielder, given that they traded Cody Bellinger. I think the big message there was, we're putting PCA out there every day. And like Brenton Doyle, this is not a guy that needs to be a fantastic hitter to be very valuable and to be worthy of being on this top 10 list. In fact, he had a 670 OPS last year, an 87 weighted runs created plus in only 123 games, and still nearly put up 3 wins. I mean, that's how good his defense is. That's how good his base running numbers were last year. So, obviously there is so much talent in the offense. We kind of saw it for a little hint there in the month of August. That was the month where he hit a lot better than usual. The line drive rate is really what we're counting on. I mean, because this is a guy that doesn't have a lot of power. Wrigley is obviously not very friendly for a lot of contact hitters going for power. He had a 26% line drive rate in the month of August, and that was his best month last year. If he can stay around, I don't know, like the 25% threshold for a line drive rate, if he could just be around the average or above it, I think we have a really good hitter on our hands here. He only had a 21.8% line drive rate last year. To be honest, he could even maybe use more ground balls. He was below the league average last year, but when you have 99th percentile sprint speed and not a lot of power, sometimes ground balls are actually more. Obviously, there's things that he needs to work on, particularly the patience. Right, he had 11th percentile walk rate. He had 2nd percentile chase rate over 40%. One stat that stuck out to me: Pico Armstrong swung at the first pitch on 48% of his plate appearances where he didn't bunt. I'm taking out bunts because that's a little cheap. 48.6% first pitch swing rate, which is around double the major league average. It's right below Corey Seager. It's right below guys like Ezekiel Tovar. And on those first pitch swings, he had a 32.3% whiff rate and negative 3.7 run value per 100. So he wasn't particularly good on them. If he can either be a little more patient or just, be a little more, better selective with which first pitches he's swinging at or just which pitches he's swinging at in general, really, that's definitely a key step forward for him to take to continue to rise on this list. But as of right now, I have him at number 8. I would love to see this one come to fruition or even exceed it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's certainly a big part of the youth movement at that position. My number 8 is someone who is still very young, but it seems like he's been in the league. He has been in the league longer than some of these guys we're talking about. But he's still very young. I'm talking about Michael Harris II. I had him as my number 3 center fielder last year. I was very optimistic about him considering his final, I believe, 4 months of the season in 2023. But unfortunately, it backfired a little bit. He did not have the greatest season. He was at about 2 wins above replacement last year. A fairly average player in general, maybe a little bit above average considering his defense. But yeah, just I'm not a big fan of the consistent offensive regression since his rookie year. His OPS plus has gone from 130 to 116 to 99 over these past 3 years. But it's not all bad. Some of the underlying stuff is still very good. All of his expected numbers last year were still 80th percentile or higher. So that is a sign that, his quality of contact, strikeout rate, walk rate, that combination of everything is still pretty good. And also there was some lack of luck that he had. He had the second unluckiest difference out of 142 in WOBA and expected WOBA on barrels. And with that, a lot of the time it can be based on the location of where he's hitting those barrels. He was top 60% of those 142 on barrels. So he was kind of middle of the pack on pull rate on barrels, but he had the second unluckiest difference in WOBA and expected WOBA on barrels. So I expect some of that to be corrected, and I expect him to be an above average hitter this upcoming year. And then along with that, he was at +8 defensive run value, which is also, really, really good. I guess what helped also drag him down the list was his base running value has kind of gone down. His sprint speed has consistently been going down over the past 2 years, and also, that BSR has been going down. It was actually negative last year. He was getting caught stealing a lot more than he was the previous 2 years. And I think that extra base taken rate was also going down a little bit. So maybe that's an outlier, but with how, the general value on the bases has gone down, I had to consider that. And that's part of what maybe dragged him down the list a little bit along, to pair with the drop in hitting production. But yeah, Michael Harris is at my number 8. Who is at your number 7?
At number 7, I have my first returner to the list for today. A guy who was number 6 last year for me that is moving down a spot, but relatively staying the same. I'm talking about Cody Bellinger. now of the New York Yankees. We talked about him last week on the show after the trade. Obviously last year was very predictable, unpredictable, in many different ways. A lot of the underlying metrics stayed the same, and the actual on the surface statistics went with it, which is what didn't happen in 2023, and that prompted the whole kind of standoff free agency that Cody Bellinger had there. But regardless, I do think that he will be more successful in Yankee Stadium. Most notably, the fact that he pulled 36.4% of his fly balls last year, which of anyone that I considered on the list, he actually had the highest percent of fly balls pulled. I think that will certainly play a lot more in Yankee Stadium than it would have in Wrigley Field. That should probably go without saying, but yeah, I do anticipate a much improved season from Cody Bellinger this year. Will it be the 881 that 881 OPS that he put up in 2023? I don't know, but I think it could be closer to that than the 751 that he put up in 2024. On top of that, he plays, I think the defensive numbers are a little skewed because he spent a lot of time at first base last year, and I really don't think that he's going to be doing that in 2024. Other than that, I think the defense is very good. The base running is also very strong as well. I think he adds a little bit of Yankee fans love to talk about like diversity in the lineup, right? Like you need less powerful guys to complement Aaron Judge, and I think Cody Bellinger is sort of a mix of both to a certain degree, right? I mean, I think we can expect maybe 25 homers next year, while also maintaining a low strikeout rate, maybe a higher batting average, not necessarily Judge high, but 270, 275, things like that. And so, yeah, I put Cody Bellinger in my 7 this year.
Yeah, you put a former Cub at number 7. I put a current Cub at number 7. It's your number 8.
Yeah.
It is Pete Crow Armstrong. He's another new addition to this list. He was not on my list last year. And yeah, as you mentioned, heading into his age 23 season. So yeah, I think that's part of, and also a theme of maybe what I've changed in my evaluation is valuing youth a little bit more, and the fact that he's heading into his age 23 season has already shown some glimpses of really quality play. Makes me really optimistic about his potential for 2025. Heading into his age 23 season, last year, despite him not necessarily having a complete full year, at least in terms of games played or plate appearances, he led all center fielders in fielding run value in 2024. So, according to the analytics, he was of all these players, he's the best at defense. So that is something I value a good bit, especially in an important defensive position like center field, where it's valued quite a bit. It's certainly valued the most among all the outfield positions. And to pair that, he was also tremendous on the bases. He went 27 for 30 on stolen bases. Not only did he steal 27 bags in a limited amount of opportunities, he only got caught 3 times. And then yeah, he also finished out the season really, really strong, which is something that I value a lot out of someone that is still learning, still getting used to the Major League Baseball game. He hit 289 with an 816 OPS and 126 weighted runs created plus in his final 51 games. If this was a guy heading into his age 34 season, I'd just think, oh, he got hot, and it's not necessarily something he'll carry into the next season. But since he's heading into his age 23 season, I believe that that's a sign of some development at the major league level, and something I'm optimistic about. And as you mentioned, if he can be, he doesn't even have to be a 126 weighted runs created plus guy to be valuable. He can be an average bat, and with that defense and base running value, he has the potential to be really, really good and make number 7 or number 8 be like an undervalue potentially. So, but still, we haven't seen too much out of him quite yet. We still have to sort of see it to believe it. So, staying a little bit, not getting too ahead of ourselves here, but still, he's certainly good enough to make this list. Who do you have at your number 6 slot?
Yeah, so in my number 6, I have someone who is new to the center field position. Also new to, I think, any of our lists. I don't know if we had him last year in a different position. Talking about O'Neal Cruz from the Pittsburgh Pirates, as my earbuds are getting taken from me. O'Neal Cruz is obviously starting his first full season in center field. I don't necessarily agree with the move, but it's happening. So, I'm judging it as he's going to be playing center field full time next year. We'll see how long that lasts. But, he had a very slow April and a very slow September. But other than that, he had a really, really good year. His final slash line was 259, 324, 449 for a 773 OPS. And I think he's capable of so much more. If there was one player that I could just handpick to have like a breakout season and reach like the 80 to 90th percentile of what their ceiling is, it would probably be O'Neal Cruz. I think in terms of the more controllable metrics, he has the potential to be like a top 5, top 10 most fun player to watch in baseball. Right, the bat speed is second highest, second fastest behind only Giancarlo Stanton. The exit velocity, he's averaging a hard hit ball on his batted balls. Obviously, the strikeout rate is not exactly where you want it to be, and it probably isn't going to get there. I mean, he's been sitting around a 30% strikeout rate for, 2 full seasons now, and we just haven't seen it go down below 30%. So I'm kind of assuming that that's kind of just who he's going to be. If it can get down to 25%, that's great, but I'm not gonna get my hopes up on that front too much. But regardless, there's still so much potential here with the batted ball metrics. He's another guy that could use a little more pull in the ball, right? He only pulled I don't know, I don't have the number off the top of my head of percent of fly balls pulled, but it definitely could be higher. But also the amount of fly balls could be higher in general as well. Only a 20.6% fly ball rate last year, a 48.1% ground ball rate. And granted, he is very fast, but he has too much power to be hitting the ball on the ground half the time, no matter how fast he is. I do feel optimistic that these changes can happen. And I think number 6 is an appropriate ranking given the potential here. One thing to note, obviously the center field thing it'll be his first full season. But he did play a little bit of it last year for the last month plus of the season. He did struggle at the plate after moving to center field because of rising ground ball rates, but he did have 2 outs above average in center field. However, he did also have -3 defensive runs saved. So the 2 metrics didn't quite agree on him, but there is hope that he can be, a productive center fielder for the Pirates next year.
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, my number 6, we're starting to overlap more. 8 through 10, we did not, overlap at all, but finally we're getting some more overlap. I have Brenton Doyle at my number 6. He is coming off a very pleasantly surprising year, not on the defensive side but offensive side, as you mentioned, and it was just such a major improvement. And yeah, I should mention he is heading into his age 27 season, so there's reason to believe that he has potential to get better here. And in 2024, he had the 3rd most FWAR among the current crop of center fielders. So he was, just in terms of overall value, he was really, really good. In terms of what improved him last year, he had a dramatic decrease in strikeout rate, a dramatic increase in sweet spot rate, improvements in barrel rate, and average exit velocity, and that all bumped his OPS plus from 53 to 104 from 2023 to 2024. And then to pair that with his defense, he also won his 2nd Gold Glove in a row, after putting up positive 15 defensive run value. And he also had the most BSR among current center fielders in 2024. And that's largely because he went 30 for 35 on stolen bases. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that OPS plus goes down a little bit because of how dramatic that increase in production was. And also considering that a lot of that production did happen in 1 month. So yeah, I don't necessarily expect him to be an above average bat, but he is one of the best, he's arguably the best defensive center fielder on here. And he's also arguably the best on the bases of this group. So that has its value in its own right. And there's not really a whole lot of players on this in this center field position that really dominated at the plate, especially among the current center fielders. So having a guy that may have below average offense isn't necessarily that much of a worry for me, considering that there aren't a lot of dominant hitters on this list. A lot of them do just kind of excel in the defense and base running department. So yeah, that's Brenton Doyle. Who is your number 5?
Yeah, my number 5 is a guy that you mentioned earlier. I'm talking about Michael Harris II. He was actually my number 5 last year as well, so no change for him on this list for me. And the reason why I put him so high is because I offers something to a stronger degree that no one else that I've mentioned before offers, and that's just reliability, right? I mean, a lot of my previous picks are guys that, showed signs or flashes of breakouts last year, but could easily regress back to being maybe off the list at very worst. I think Michael Harris has the highest likelihood of return to the list out of everyone that I've mentioned so far, which is why I have him in my number 5 spot, along with just, several other things. It was a down year for him offensively, but he did battle injury like most people on the Braves. But, I think the signs of potential are still there. The bat speed, like I mentioned, is very high. The exit velocity and hard hit numbers are very good. Certainly the defense is still there as well. 93 OAA, despite, missing some games in center last year. So, I mean, I think the defense was perhaps even stronger than outside above average can even really make it out to be. Other than that, the batted ball metrics could use some improvement. The 49% ground ball rate could be dropped a few percent and given to fly ball and line drive rate. I think he does have the power to be a 20 to 25 home run guy a year if he can lift the ball just enough. The pull rate did, however, go up last year, which I was very happy about. In 2022, he had a pull rate of 32.1%. In 2023, it was 33.3%. And in 2024, it jumped to 40.7%. So he's pulling the ball a lot more. At least that's what he did last year. I do feel optimistic that, if he can continue that this year and improve some of the other things, a lot of good results will follow. We can get him back up to that 800 OPS guy that he was the first 2 years of his career, while maintaining strong defense and center. Maybe the base running can get back to where it was in the past as well. So I think there's still a lot of untapped stuff here with Michael Harris II, and he is remaining in my top 5 for the center field list.
Right. Yeah. And last thing I'll say on him is he really finished the year out really strong. He hit 367 with an 1103 OPS in his final 18 games. Help put the Braves in a playoff spot. So yeah. On to my top 5. And my number 5 is your number 6 center fielder. It is O'Neal Cruz. As he was obviously not on my list last year because he was a shortstop, and he wasn't on my shortstop list either. But yeah, I feel like we had been waiting on the full year, the full culmination of O'Neal Cruz, and it wasn't anything crazy last year, but it was still pretty good and very productive. And also he remains very young. He's heading into his age 26 season. And we mentioned it is a new position for him. And I am pretty optimistic about what he can bring to the table in center field. He put up, as you mentioned, he put up +2 outs above average in only 23 games in center field. And obviously rates will change and stuff like that, and things will be adjusted. But you put that over a full season, he's, going to put up double-digit outs above average if he keeps that up. So that's a really good sign. And he also has amazing arm strength. And as long as he doesn't overthrow everybody, I think he can bring some very good arm value to the table as well, from center field, possibly even more than he did at shortstop. But yeah, and on the offensive side of things, put up a 113 OPS plus last year, and he also went 22 for 23 on stolen bases. So that speed is really starting to show its value. He's learning to run the bases very well, and did it very well last year. He had 3.5 F4 last year, which would have ranked 5th among the current center fielders in F4 in 2024. And also in expected categories, he was 75th percentile or higher on all of them. And he was also 97th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, hard hit rate, and barrel rate. and that's always just a good sign to have that base of things. If he can, we're always more likely to see dramatic fluctuation on strikeout rate more than average exit velocity. Your average exit velocity is usually what it is, and kind of stays around there. He can more easily fix the strikeout rate issue than the average exit velocity. And even still, considering that he probably will have a good amount of strikeouts, I still think he's going to be a very productive player this upcoming year. So yeah, and not to mention age 26 season. So he still has time to develop. Who is your number 4?
At number 4, I'm falling back into an old trap, which I'm sure you are as well, because you haven't mentioned him. But I'm talking about Byron Buxton.
Mm.
At this point, I think you kind of have to accept you're probably not getting more than 400 plate appearances out of him. The last time he had more than 400 plate appearances in a season was 2017. And hey, 2020, it wasn't his fault, but unfortunately, every other year he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. But I mean, he put up a 142 weighted runs created plus last year, and also had the lowest strikeout rate for him since 2021. So that was pretty awesome. I just can't ignore what is here, because it's not just the on the surface numbers. Every underlying metric kind of backs up what we're seeing, right? The actual WOBA was 353 last year. It was a little bit lower than his actual WOBA of 366. The hard hit rate was where it usually is at 48%. The average exit velocity was close to 92 miles an hour. The sweet spot rate was almost 40%. The bat speed was nearly averaging a fast swing. The defense was still there. The base running is still there. The health, unfortunately, has never been there, and it still isn't. But additionally, he's also pulling the ball continuingly to do so. His pull rate has been above 45% every year since 2020. Every year in the 2020s, Byron Buxton has put up a pull rate above 45%. It follows on ground balls too. I think last year it was around 35%. And there are some things that went down. The walk rate was nearly cut in half from 2023. I didn't care for that. But regardless, there's still just so much here. Even if you're not going to get it in a full season, a 142 weighted runs created plus is not something you can really just put down and ignore, even if it's not in a full season. Byron Buxton's going into his age 31 season next year. I'm really hoping we can start to see more consistency, although you really just can't rely on it. But regardless, I'm still putting him in my 4 spot.
Yeah. And yeah, something I'll say before I reveal my number 4 is it was weird putting this list together because it doesn't seem like anyone at the position has much of a consistent track record in both health and performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of these players are
really none of them. Yeah.
Like a lot of these players we're talking about maybe just had their first good year in the majors or first glimpses of potential greatness. Like there's not a lot of guys. Whereas last week, when we talked about the first baseman, like Christian Walker, very consistent. Freddie Freeman, very consistent. Maybe had a little bit of a down year, but still was very productive. Bryce Harper, very consistent. There's really no one like that at the center field position right now. So, outside of maybe one guy, but even then it's arguable. So yeah, now my number 4, we're overlapping here is Byron Buxton.
I figured.
And yeah, like the reason why I mentioned that is because on a normal list, I probably have him more down the list because as you mentioned, we haven't seen him hit 400 plate appearances in 7 years. So it's been a long time since we've seen him have a full season, but we don't really know what we're getting out of a lot of these players on this list. So and even with him not having much playing time last year, he was still one of the best center fielders in baseball. Despite him only playing 102 games, he ranked 4th among the current center fielders in FWAR in 2024. That is because he put up a 137 OPS plus and +4 defensive run value at the center field position. And yeah, along with the 137 OPS plus, his underlying stuff was there. 85th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, barrel rate, hard hit rate, sweet spot rate, expected WOBA, and expected slugging. So yes, he is. We're not going to see him. More than likely not going to see him hit 140 games this year. But in the games that he is going to play, he's probably going to be really, really good, and he's probably going to produce quite a bit. So that has its own value. Sure, you'd love to see him play more, but there are worse options to have go out there for 102 games. Yeah. So yeah, Byron Buxton, my number 4. Who do you have at number 3?
Yeah, I'm like that. Number 3, this is where I put Mike Trout. He was my number 2 last year. Byron Buxton, by the way, was my number 8 last year. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I mean, this is such a weird, because he has a number 1 ceiling still. I would argue. The only thing is that ceiling is a full season, and we just haven't seen it since basically 2019. You could kind of argue 2022. I mean, it wasn't a full season. It was 119 games, but it was the closest, overwhelmingly the closest we've seen him get to a full season in the 2020s. It was still a 139 weighted runs created plus for him last year, which is actually quite terrible by Mike Trout standards. Great by regular standards, but Mike Trout has a 169 career weighted runs created plus, even with the last 2 seasons being a little less than ideal. In 2024, he had the fewest number of plate appearances he's had in any season throughout his career at 126. So it is kind of hard to read into what the actual performance was, but regardless, he did have his lowest strikeout rate since 2019. The walk rate remained very good, and a lot of the underlying metrics were very strong as usual. A 17.1% barrel rate, a 40% sweet spot rate, a 405 expected weighted on base average. There is still a lot of very good stuff here. It's just a matter of will we see it or not. Much like Byron Buxton, can't really rely on a full season because we simply haven't seen it since you and I were freshmen in college, and now we're going into year 2 and 3 respectively of our full-time jobs. So you can't rely on it, but you still just can't ignore what he actually has done when he's been on the field. I can't put him at number 1 because of the health complications, but I can't put him below number 3 given the other players on this list because of what we have seen from him. So Mike Trout is remaining in my top 3 on this list. He is my number 3.
Yeah, my number 3 is also Mike Trout. So we have the same 4 and 3. And yeah, I put him at number 5 last year. So it is funny to kind of see him go up this list just based on the circumstances. Last year I had Judge, J-Rod, Harris, and Robert ahead of him. Judge is no longer playing center field, and then Harris and Robert moved down this list because of just how they played. Trout did well when he played last year, but he only played 29 games. And granted, I expect him to play more than 29 this year. How many he'll play, that's certainly a question mark. But yeah, as you mentioned, that on the field stuff, it's still there. He still has it when he's on the field. He's still also like a tremendous athlete. He was 90th percentile in sprint speed last year. He started stealing bases again. He had the most stolen base attempts that he had since 2019, and that was in only 29 games that he had last year. So like there's still the potential to be a very good all-around player. He's never been a defensive liability, at least according to StatCast. And he put up an xWOBA over 400. That's an elite level. If he was if he qualified for percentiles, that would be like 95th percentile or even higher. So like that's still there. And when he's on the field, he's going to be a very good player. It's just a matter of if he will be on the field. Same thing as I said last year. And that was unfortunately proven to a great extent last year. I expected him to play a little bit more than that, but yeah, you just you're hoping for the best. Even considering that he's been a star he was a star more than a decade ago. He still only heading into his age 33 season. So he's still like it's still there. It's still there. It's just the fact that he has not played. And that's kind of the frustrating thing is it's not like, oh, he's playing, but who cares? It's like, or oh, he's not playing, but who cares? It's like he's not playing, and if he was playing, he'd be doing wonderful. So yeah, that's Mike Trout is my number 3. Who is your number 2 center fielder?
Yeah. I mean, Mike Trout to me is still appointment television.
Certainly, yeah.
Like when he's on, I'm watching. I will be there. You can find me watching the Angels games. Uh, when Mike Trout is on the field, which just we need to see it more. At number 2, I'm obviously picking another returner to the or not another returner, but a first timer on the list, a guy who finished runner up for the Rookie of the Year award last year and put together an outstanding rookie campaign for the San Diego Padres. I'm talking about Jackson Merrill. He is going into amazingly his age 22 season. Last year, obviously, a stellar performance, an 826 OPS in nearly 600 plate appearances. So many things that he did well. He was hitting the ball hard. He was putting it in the sweet spot, not striking out a lot. The walk rate could have been a little bit better, but it was his rookie season. I'll cut him some slack. Regardless, this is a pretty clear number 2 for me. One thing that I talked about with Jackson Merrill pretty early last season, I said this as a joke, but I really did mean it. Before he was, a clear Rookie of the Year candidate, I feel like I've never watched Jackson Merrill pull a ball. I feel like I've only seen him hit it to dead center or to the opposite field. And my eyes were really not deceiving me. Hang on, let me pull up the actual numbers here. From March through through June last year, from 328 to 630, he had a 29.4% pull rate, and that number went up to 34.2% in the final 3 months of the season. Additionally, when he was hitting fly balls, he had an 18.3% pull rate on fly balls from March to June, and that number went up to 24.4% from July to September. So still not league average quite yet, but obviously it's an improvement. And I think that's, in large part, some of the reason why he became a clear Rookie of the Year candidate late in the season there. There's obviously plenty of other things as well. The defense for a guy that came up as a shortstop was outstanding in center field. He was hitting the ball hard. Like I mentioned, he was hitting it for contact very well. He looked pretty close to a 5-tool player last year. If we're being honest, I mean, there's, the arm strength is very good. The defense is very good. He stole 16 bases last year. Jackson Merrill looks like almost a very complete player. I would love the walks to go up, but that's about it. And he's my number 2 center fielder going into next year.
Right. My number 2 is actually Julio Rodriguez, and I originally had him number 1, and then I started writing out the notes for my number 2, and I was like, I don't know, my number 2, he kind of earned his spot, and I'll get into that later. But more talking about Julio Rodriguez. This is the second year in a row I have him at number 2. I had him behind Judge last year. But yeah, kind of similar to Michael Harris in a little bit of a way. He has had kind of consistent drop off in hitting production. Everything else has kind of stayed pretty good, but his hitting production has been going down, at least in terms of the actual results. But in turn, with what the positives of Julio Rodriguez is despite a little bit of a down year last year, he still leads all current center fielders in FWAR over the last 2 years. And he's also only heading into his age 24 season. He's been a prominent figure in the league ever since he came into it, but we still have to remember he's a very, very young player. His average exit velocity, barrel rate, strikeout, and walk rates were not very far off from his rookie season. And in that rookie season, he had a 147 OPS plus. So maybe had a little bit of luck on his side that rookie year. But in terms of just the base offensive stuff, I think it's still kind of there. He hasn't had, it's not like he's hitting the ball that worse or he's striking out a lot more. It's just, a matter of maybe kind of his pull rate's a little bit, and also maybe a little bit of a unfortunate luck on his side. But yeah, he's certainly still a very, very quality player. I could certainly see him being number one in my next year's list, but this year's at number two. Yeah, now on to your number one.
Yeah, so at number one is where I put Julio Rodriguez. I do think he is the number one center fielder going into next year, and I'll get to more that in a second. I had him at number two last year, so he is moving up from me. And yeah, look, he did have a down year last year. He had a 734 OPS, which is not very good and not what you wanted from him. Say after he won Rookie of the Year in 2022. I spent, Chris, like a good hour trying to find what went wrong. And really, there's not much in any of the underlying metrics. The only thing that I found, in comparison to his previous years was his pull rate went down. It went from 39% to 33%. But even then, there was not much that really followed from that. All of his batted ball metrics are relatively the same. His ground ball rate it went down by 3% last year. His fly ball rate went up by 2%. I looked up his pulled fly ball rate. It was the same. I looked up his opposite field and straightaway fly ball rate. They stayed the same. There was really not much change that actually took place for Julio Rodriguez under the surface. And I just couldn't understand why exactly we saw such a dip in production. The strikeout rate has been relatively the same. The walk rate's been relatively the same. There's just not much that's changed from him, but I did find this and I thought it was interesting. And this is a small sample size. I'm making this out to be like the very base of the argument, but this is more why I think he's going to return more to form. One thing that I found is that he had some terrible luck on opposite field fly balls this year. And I don't mean like his numbers on opposite field fly balls decreased. No, the exit velocity was the same. The barrel rate was the same. All of the good numbers that you want to see on these fly balls were relatively the same. He just didn't get the same results. And I looked at this. Julio Rodriguez had 14 fly balls to the opposite field that were considered blasts, which is one of the new bat tracking metrics. It takes into account if you are, if it's a fast swing and if it's what is it again? It's a fast swing and it's basically a barrel, but if it's a fast swing and if it's squared up is what it is. So it was a fast swing over 75 miles per hour, and the combination of bat speed and exit velocity, or pitch speed and bat speed, produced an 80th percentile possible average exit velocity. So essentially, it means you crushed it in basic terms. Julio Rodriguez had 14 of these fly balls last year, and he was one of 21 hitters to have at least 10 of these balls. The average hit distance was 335 feet. That was the lowest on this list of 21. The second lowest was Aaron Judge at 346. So an 11-foot difference in average hit distance on these fly balls. Probably had to do with the spin he was getting on the baseball. I looked at T-Mobile Park, and the whole venue didn't show these kinds of metrics, this kind of drop off. I think it was more unlucky than anything. And that's a lot of home runs that Julio Rodriguez missed that became just warning track fly balls. I believe if he can get back to normal on these, by the way, he hit 357 on these batted balls, the lowest on the list. He slugged 1143, also the lowest on the list. If he can get up to like the 1800 mark, that's like 5 more home runs that we're adding, that we're subtracting from fly balls as well. And that alone puts him a lot closer to where he was previously. Add in, higher pull rate. Maybe he decreases the strikeout rate, increases the walk rate a little bit. I still think we have the best center fielder in the game. So I am banking on a bounce back from Julio Rodriguez next year.
Right. Yeah, I certainly think he will improve this upcoming year, and yeah, I think that might be reflected in my top 50 list, which is where he's going to be, top 50 list in players of baseball. But yeah, my number one is Jackson Merrill, who obviously, or I guess he could have been ranked last year, but he was not ranked on my list heading into 2024. And he gets my number one spot this year. He led all current center fielders in F4 last year, and he was the 7th best player in baseball in his final 91 games of 2024. And yeah, the reason why I I guess I put him number one, and I'll preface this by saying, usually when I talk about these players and why I rank them, I have to go kind of on a track record and talk about what they've not only done last year, but what they've done in years past. But with Jackson Merrill and Major League experience, it's only last year. And what I saw last year was really, really impressive on really all fronts. Not only was he a very good hitter and arguably the best hitter of these current center fielders, he was just a great all-around player, and just really impressive in all aspects. He was, with the hitting stuff, not only did he get very good results and have a 130, I believe it was a 130 OPS plus, he was also 94th percentile in expected WOBA. He actually underperformed his expected metrics. Also 96th percentile in expected slugging. And during that hot stretch where he was the 7th best player in baseball, his actual numbers and expected numbers were pretty in line. He didn't really luck his way into having those results. He was hitting the ball hard, had a high barrel rate, was improving his fly ball rate, improving his pull rate, as you mentioned. And it just, like, things looked really, really good on the underlying side. Also, on defense, he was 97th percentile in outs above average. Had 12 outs above average in his first year. Basically his first year playing center field. And then, yeah, not to mention he did that as a 21-year-old. So he's heading into his age 22 season. There's obviously, it's not the expectation, but there's reason to believe that he can have an even better year. So yeah, given just what he gave us last year, and especially the last basically 2/3 of the season last year, just there's a lot to love, and I couldn't deny what that was, and the fact that we haven't seen him in, I can't really say that, oh, we had a rough 2023 in the big leagues. Like, he wasn't in the big leagues, so I can't really put that against him, or think like, oh, that's a possibility. I only have 2024 to go off of, and I really loved what he did in 2024, in terms of results and what was under the surface as well. So and yeah, given the fact that he's going to be heading into his age 22 season, I have to love what his potential is for next year. But yeah, those are our lists. I should mention a
Wanna go through 'em?
couple honorable mentions, and I'll let you throw in some as well, because I did write a lot of guys down,
Yeah, so did I.
because yeah, that like 8 through 10, even like 7 through 10 was tough to fill out and figure out what the order was. I should go into the history of my doc. I did originally have Jake Myers in this list, but pushed him out. He's a really good defensive center fielder with Houston and improved his offensive production last year. Evan Carter was in consideration because on the Fangraphs projected the lineup, he's projected as a center fielder, and I still like, his potential and whatnot, so he was in consideration. Garrett Mitchell and also Jacob Young were in consideration, along with JJ Bleday. He was also in consideration. So
A lot of
yeah,
interesting names on this one for sure.
I had a long list of people to consider, but ultimately these were my 10. Who did you have as honorable mentions?
Yeah, Luis Robert was my number 11. Didn't anticipate I would kick him off the list, but that is what I ultimately ended up doing. Parker Meadows was another one as well. So both of the guys that I didn't have that you had were in consideration for me. You didn't have Cody Bellinger, did you?
No, I did not.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I'm kind of blanking on who the other ones were that I was thinking of. There were others as well. But yeah,
Yeah,
should we
um
go through our lists?
right. I think the thing, I probably would have had Cody Bellinger on my honorable, or in my doc originally, but I think when I was putting together the list, he was still on the Cubs and was at a different
Mm,
position. So
yep.
maybe he would have been in more consideration if I wasn't making the list earlier. Um but yeah, 10 through 1. What was your 10 through 1?
Yeah, so number 10, I had JJ Bleday. Number 9, Brenton Doyle. Number 8, Pete Crow Armstrong. Number 7, Cody Bellinger. Number 6, O'Neill Cruz. Number 5, Michael Harris II. Number 4, Byron Buxton. Number 3, Mike Trout. Number 2, Jackson Merrill. And number 1, Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, my number 10 was Parker Meadows. Number 9, Luis Robert. Number 8, Michael Harris. Number 7, Pete Crow Armstrong. Number 6, Brenton Doyle. Number 5, O'Neill Cruz. Number 4, Byron Buxton. Number 3, Mike Trout. Number 2, Julio Rodriguez. And number 1, Jackson Merrill.
We've yet to agree on the number 1, but I do feel like that will change next week.
Yeah, I hope so, because I haven't put the list together, but I'm pretty sure I know who my number 1 will be, and I'm a pretty big fan of the guy. So,
which is, yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Haven't put it together yet, but I have a feeling I know who's going to be at the top when I'm done considering.
Yeah, unless I get really surprised, maybe like maybe some random guy had like a 410 expected WOBA and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah,
but
Ryan Jeffers, number 1.
Ryan Jeffers randomly will be like at the top of the barrel rate, like leaderboards.
Yep.
He'll do that. But yeah, that's it for this episode of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you enjoyed our top 10 list and our kind of review of the free agent signings of the past week. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. We take a look at our playlists, or who we've had as our guest playlist, especially had some good guests for the year of 2024. Had Stephen Schock on, had Mark Simon on once again, had Matt Brash on. Am I missing anybody?
I'm gonna feel like an asshole when we are. I don't think so.
I'm gonna make sure.
Yeah.
Aren't forgetting somebody. I'll go to the playlist myself.
Other than I mean, we had a draft this year. I guess those count as guests, but those are it's a little bit of a different scenario.
Who do we have on this year? Yep, no, those are all the guys.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought so. Hopefully,
yes.
Hopefully there. I mean, I'm not gonna guarantee anything, but
yeah,
there's wheels to be put in motion for guests in 2025.
Yeah, we would love to have more. So yeah, if you are interested in any of those interviews, go to the guest playlist interviews, because we have a good history of them. We've had Jeff Passan on before, Chris Rose, Sarah Langs, Mike Petriello, among many others. So go check that out on the Above Replacement Radio YouTube page. Check us out on social media. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran. And follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be previewing the top 10 catchers in baseball and talking all the other happenings in Major League Baseball. Once again, see you then.
This conversation is over.